The origin stories to the antagonists from both Ghost Camp and Welcome to Dead House are very similar due to them both featuring a strange, dark mist. And in each of those books, they do not go into too much detail on how this mist was created. Ghost Camp does not go into any detail at all on it, while Welcome to Dead House does give a slight explanation for the events of the book and how this dark mist was created. But I don't even think that's that strong of an explanation. And it's got to be something entirely different due to that same dark mist being featured in Ghost Camp, and the explanation given is not anywhere close to the area featured in Ghost Camp. So pretty much in this video, I'm going to be trying to solve the mystery of the dark mist that is featured in both Ghost Camp and Welcome to Dead House. But before I continue, spoiler warning for Welcome to Dead House and Ghost Camp, and also Vampire Breath, which is the 49th Goosebumps book in the original series. But anyway, guys, with that out of the way, let's continue on to the theory. Okay, so pretty much the origin stories to the Ghost Campers and Welcome to Dead House, as I said before, is very similar. Basically, in Ghost Camp, they were created because there's this dark mist that enveloped a camp called Camp Spirit Moon. At this current time, before the mist attacked the whole entire camp, the people there were just doing your average camp activities, you know, like canoeing or something like that. I don't think they get into too much detail on what they were doing at that time. But pretty much this dark mist comes inside the camp, envelops the whole entire area, turning everyone there into ghosts. And so pretty much if a ghost tries to leave the camp, I believe they just turn into the dark mist that made them turn into ghosts in the first place. So every summer or so, they invite one or two people to come over to their camp, Camp Spirit Moon, where they can steal the people's bodies and leave the camp due to them having now a physical body. And that's pretty much the origin story to the Ghost Campers. And as I said before, that one's very simple and does give an explanation on why there is a dark mist enveloping the camp. But anyway, next let's take a look at the Dark Falls residence stories from Welcome to Dead House. Pretty much there's this chemical factory or plastic factory, I can't remember which one, but basically there's this factory in this town called Dark Falls, and supposedly this factory malfunctioned, creating a mist that went across the entire town, turning everyone there into zombies. And so these zombies are completely different from your average zombies, because they're actually intelligent, and also, once every year, they have to feed off of human blood. And so, pretty much, in order to combat their constant hunger for human blood, they invite one or two people, or a whole family of people, once every year, to come over to their town so they can eat them. And that's pretty much all there is for the Dark Falls residents. And as I said, they do give a bit of an explanation on why the dark mist happened in the first place, and that's because of a chemical accident, but I do not believe that that chemical factory accident and stuff like that is the real cause for the dark mist. Because obviously, the dark mist seen in Ghost Camp and the one in Welcome to Dead House are very similar, and it's almost 100% chance that the mist seen in Ghost Camp and Welcome to Dead House are very much the same exact thing. Because you can see similarities in the monsters. Both of them have to invite people like once every year or so to come over so they can do evil antagonistic stuff to the victims who come over from that town. Also, everyone in Dark Falls does not leave the town, just like everyone in Ghost Camp does not leave Ghost Camp. And again, both of them involve a dark mist. I think that's enough evidence to say that those two myths are exactly the same. But here's the problem. What about the chemical factory accident? In order to say that for sure, we're going to have to say that the chemical factory accident never happened in the first place. That maybe was a cover-up, or that's just a coincidence that that happened during the same time. Because there's a lot of evidence to disprove the fact that it was all the chemical factory incident, and it could possibly be a supernatural phenomenon that I'll try to explain later on in this video. But first, let's try to disprove the whole chemical factory incident, and the first thing is that there's not a chemical factory near the area in Ghost Camp. We can easily tell that the chemical factory mist could not have gone that far into the woods and stuff like that if only the town of Dark Falls was impacted by the mist, because Dark Falls is a small town, and, the mist could only go around Dark Falls, it seems like. So if it only goes around Dark Falls, then that means that it cannot go far enough to Ghost Camp or something like that. And it seems like there's no factories near Ghost Camp due to the entire camp being in the middle of the woods. So that's first bit of evidence. Second bit of evidence is how there are gravestones and warning signs all across the chemical factory and in Dark Falls. Because in the episode, there's actually warning signs surrounding the chemical factory. Why would undead zombies set up warning signs around the chemical factory? That doesn't make any sense, so it would have to be done by someone else. And I don't really see why you do that if the entire town's dead. You know what I mean? And you could say that people would think that these guys are alive since they're still undead zombies. But, they wouldn't notice that these guys were dead and all that stuff, so that's why they put warning signs and all that. But then there's the gravestones that you see in the Dark Falls graveyard. How can there be gravestones in that area? Because most likely these Welcome Dead House people would still be alive. They wouldn't be faking dead, most likely, when these people were burying their bodies. So how is this possible that they're having gravestones when these guys would not seem to be dead? You could say that maybe they become undead zombies later on, like maybe a year or a week or something like that, or even a day. But if you take a look at one of the victims to the zombies, which is the main protagonist's dog in the book named Petey, he was killed, and then one day later he became a zombie. It obviously took way over one day to set up all those gravestones from the chemical accident. So that would mean that the chemical accident probably isn't the thing that's wrong. And so, also, there's the fact that the gravestones and all that stuff, you know what I mean? I'm kind of having a hard time explaining it right now, but you see what I'm trying to make a point here. They have gravestones there when these guys should still be alive. And so, I think that kind of disproves the whole chemical factory accident and all that stuff due to these people not being dead. Why would they put warning signs all across it? And why would no one else investigate it? And all of that stuff. Also, the chemical factory should have precautions to anything happening in the plastic chemical factory, I believe, because, it's a plastic chemical factory, and they should have precautions and stuff like that. Maybe because it was a long time ago they didn't, but, there is that bit of evidence that would kind of make me struggle to believe that anything would happen like that. And why shouldn't there be more towns like Dark Falls? Because this should seem common if there's a bunch of bad things going on in chemical factories, at least a long time ago. And so you'd think that maybe there's a bit more, but in the Goosebumps universe, it's only revealed there is one Dark Falls. And so, anyway, guys, that is pretty much all the evidence I have to disprove the Dark Falls thing. And so now it is time to see what actually the Dark Mist is. And so, while I was making this video, I struggled between two Dark Mists in the Goosebumps universe, because it's really not that many. And that is the Graveyard Ghouls and Vampire Breath. And I eventually ruled out the Graveyard Ghouls due to it really not making any sense how the Graveyard Ghouls, despite taking the form of mist, could do that. So I kind of X'd them off the list. And so I eventually came upon the cause of the supernatural events of Ghost Camp and Welcome Dead House being Vampire Breath. And just think about it. Both of them are dark mist. You can see in Vampire Breath, when the main protagonist opened the bottle of Vampire Breath, it sort of caused this green, odorous mist. In case you don't know what Vampire Breath is, basically, the food for vampires is, it's blood. And the drink for vampires, though, is Vampire Breath. Basically, it gives vampires all these capabilities, like enhanced memory, time travel, makes them not become as aged and, becomes younger. And that's pretty much all there is to Vampire Breath. It also grants vampire powers to less powerful vampires. And I also believe that it also could grant vampire powers to people who are not even vampires. And I think that's what happened in Welcome to Dead House and Ghost Camp. There's this vampire breath that released from the bottle and spread all across small town Dark Falls and Ghost Camp, and this caused people to be not, well, exactly vampires, but very similar to vampires. Take a look at Welcome to Dead House. These guys are very similar to vampires. Both of them drink blood. While they do not have fangs, but fangs do not really come with vampires. I think you have to put them in their mouth or something like that, as implied from vampire breath. But they both drink blood, first thing. Second thing is that they cannot touch the light. And this would also explain the whole graveyard plot hole. If these guys are still alive, why would they create graves of these people? And why would there be a chemical accident and all that stuff? And, you know, all that. I'm sorry, guys. And it would explain it if these guys were vampires, because vampires have to sleep in their coffins before the morning or they will die. And that would make sense for these people. It also makes sense how they don't have to build a new house every year when someone comes in, because once they kill someone, they too become an undead zombie in Dead House. And it would explain why they do not have to build a new house every year for the new people there, which would be very suspicious. And I don't think there's that many builders in Dark Falls due to it being a small town. And so it would explain it if these guys are vampires and they have to sleep in coffins, which is inside the graveyard. And so there is that as well. And ghost campers are very similar to the Dark Falls people, so it would make sense. It also makes sense how these guys still retain maybe solid form at almost all times, because in Ghost Camp they seem to be solid all the time, except when they are injured or something like that. It would sort of make sense if they were vampires, though, due to the only weakness of vampires being light and being stabbed with a stake in the heart. And so, if all these other things happen, then they probably wouldn't be damaged by that. And it would explain how these guys have a low tolerance for pain and all that stuff, all while being solid in a large majority of the book. And also, I think it explained why they do not leave the camp, not because they're a ghost, because while in most Goosebumps books involving ghosts, they do usually are refined to one area, and that means they can't leave and all that stuff, but I don't think they have turned into mist if they go out, and I believe there are a bunch of ghost fights in past events, and they do not turn into dark mist, but I believe in the Dracula stuff and all that stuff, when they're exposed to light, they turn to mist. But not only that, but also they kind of use smoke and all that stuff when they turn into bats and all that. I'm not really sure. Maybe I'm just getting confused with some Batman things. You know, when Batman flies away and he fires a smoke bomb or something like that. I may get confused with that, but I believe Dracula, you know, has this mist rising up during the old movies and then turns into a bat. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. Whew, and so that's pretty much all the evidence for the ghost campers, but there is also another thing, and that is the fact, as I sort of mentioned before, how they can't leave the camp. I said in other Goosebumps books, ghosts usually just stay in one area. This could be for a number of reasons, probably same case as the ghost campers. They can't leave the area, but I don't believe they turn into mist. I do not believe that, and also some other ghosts actually are able to leave the area, like Andrew Craw, who was in Hill House at one point in the book, but then was in a graveyard in the Goosebumps Terror in the Graveyard game. So, there is that as well. And also, if you take a look at Return to Ghost Camp, we have a very similar vampire being. While it's a completely different camp, with a completely different name and all that stuff, they do have a vampire-like being, and that could be, maybe, since it's a Return to Ghost Camp, it's in the same area, but since maybe the ghosts were defeated, or the vampires, or something like that. So, you know, normal humans took over, and then they were killed by a leftover vampire, which would be, not vampire, but, you know, antagonist from Ghost Camp. That is the Snatcher from Return to Ghost Camp. I'm so sorry. I'm spoiling Return to Ghost Camp. Anyway, spoiler warning also for Return to Ghost Camp. If you haven't read this book as well, I'm so sorry I'm spoiling it. I did not plan to go into detail on Return to Ghost Camp. But anyway, their main antagonist in the book basically can turn from human to a fox. And while Dracula is most known for, you know, turning from a bat to a human and all that stuff, he can also turn into wolves as well, which is very similar to the Snatcher. Since the Snatcher is sort of like a wolf, and when it's in its fox form, since foxes are very similar to dogs and dogs are very similar to wolves. So that would also make a whole lot of sense. But keep in mind, the ghost campers and the Dark Falls residents are not exactly vampires. Maybe due to them only being exposed to vampire breath and all that stuff. And you might say, though, that probably vampire breath wouldn't grant these people vampire abilities due to someone who's not a vampire in vampire breath being exposed to the vampire breath and not turning into a vampire. That could be the case, but you should take a look at another item in vampire breath, and that is the werewolf sweat. In the twist ending to the book, there's this item called werewolf sweat, very similar to vampire breath. And anyway, when they did that, it turned the main protagonist's friend, who was exposed to it, into a werewolf, I believe. And so I think that is a huge piece of evidence to prove the point that vampire breath can turn people into vampires. And that's what happened to the Dark Falls residents and the ghost campers. But anyway, guys, comment down below what you guys think about this theory. Do you think this is likely or unlikely? And, do you think that the Dark Falls residents became something similar to vampires, well, not exactly being vampires themselves? Or do you think that... I'm so sorry, guys. I just forgot what I was going to say. Or do you think that these guys were created due to the Dark Falls chemical accident? But anyway, guys, tell me what you guys think. And thank you guys so much for watching. And that is the end of my theory.